Everyone, let's discuss about general structure of vertebrae. Each vertebra consists of three parts. First one is body, corpus vertebrae. Second one is arch, arcus vertebrae. And last one is processes, processus vertebrae. Now we'll see about body. The body is the prismatic or cylindrical ventral part of a vertebra on which the other parts are constructed. Each vertebral body has a convex cranial, called extremitus cranialis, and a concave caudal, called extremitas caudalis, extremity, which are covered by a plate of hyaline cartilage. The dorsal surface of the body of the vertebrae is marked by longitudinal grooves, nutritional foramina, and a median ridge for ligamentous attachment. And the ventral surface carries the ventral crest, called crista ventralis, which varies in size in the different regions of the vertebral column. Now we'll talk about second part, that is arch. The vertebral arch or neural arch forms over the dorsal surface of the vertebral body, thus completing the enclosure of a vertebral foramen, called foramen vertebral. Each vertebral arch is made up of two lateral pedicles and a dorsal plate called lamina arcus vertebrae. The vertebral foramina correspond with that of adjacent vertebrae to form the vertebral canal, which surrounds the spinal cord, meninges, spinal nerves, blood vessels, ligaments, fat, and connective tissue. The diameter of the vertebral canal is greatest at the level of the first and second cervical vertebrae. Remnants of a ventral arch are found on the caudal vertebrae of cats, dogs, and ruminants, which are known as hemal arch. We will discuss in detail about it while discussing caudal vertebrae. The bases of the pedicles are notched at both anteriorly and posteriorly. When successive vertebrae articulate, the notches on either side of adjacent vertebrae outline the intervertebral foramina, foramina intervertebralia, through which the spinal nerves pass. Dorsally, most of the vertebral arches fit closely without leaving a space. Yet there are three sites in the vertebral column where an interarcuate space, that is, spatium interarcuole, is formed between the arches of adjacent vertebrae. These have clinical importance, since they can be used to enter the vertebral canal for injections or for collecting cerebrospinal fluid. These are: first is atlanto-occipital space between the occipital bone and the first vertebra, atlas. Second is atlantoaxial space between the first atlas and the second vertebra, axis. And third is lumbosacral space, spatium lumbosacral, between the last lumbar vertebra and the sacrum. Now we'll talk about last part of vertebra, that is processes. Each vertebra has a number of processes for the attachment of muscles and ligaments and for the articulation with adjacent vertebrae. The following processes can be present: one dorsal or spinous process, processus spinosus, at the mid-dorsal line of the vertebral arch. Four articular processes, positioned cranial and caudal to the root of the spinous process. Two transverse processes, projecting laterally from the base of the vertebral arch. And two mammillary processes, between the transverse and cranial articular processes of the thoracic and lumbar vertebrae. Some additional processes are found in some species, that is, two accessory processes between the transverse and the caudal articular processes of the last thoracic vertebrae of carnivores and pigs, and the lumbar vertebrae of carnivores.